The first thing I heard underwater was laughter. It came to me warped through the pool, high and distant, while the water crushed against my ears and my dress dragged at my legs like wet rope. Above me, the lights beneath the glass atrium broke into pale, trembling streaks. I kicked once, found nothing beneath my shoes, and swallowed water when I tried to call for help. I could not swim. Corinne knew that. For one sickening second, I saw her through the shifting surface. My younger sister stood at the edge of the pool in her wedding dress, one hand covering her mouth, not in horror, but in amusement. She did not reach for me. She did not shout for anyone to help. She watched me sink as if she were waiting for the room to understand the joke. Then my shoulder struck something solid. Jocelyn had jumped in fully dressed. Another guest caught the back of my gown, and a man I barely knew grabbed my forearm. Together they hauled me toward the tile while my lungs fought for air. When they dragged me onto the wet stone, Corinne laughed and said, "It was just for fun." By sunrise, her new husband would leave the hotel with his daughter and without his bride, but at that moment, I had no idea what he had heard after I was pulled from the water. Before I tell you what happened next, I hope you are doing well today. Stay with me, because this was only the beginning, and please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what my family tried to do after the wedding. I rolled onto my side and coughed until my ribs burned. Water ran from my hair into my eyes. My throat felt scraped raw, and every breath came in a thin, unsteady pull. Jocelyn knelt beside me, soaked from the shoulders down, one hand firm between my shoulder blades. "Do not sit up yet," she said. "Just breathe." Corinne remained near the pool. Guests had formed a loose circle around us, some concerned, others confused, and several still wearing the embarrassed smiles people use when they are not sure whether they have witnessed cruelty or comedy. "I said it was a joke," Corinne repeated. Her smile had tightened. "Leah, tell them, you are okay." I lifted my head enough to look at her. My voice came out rough, but it was clear. "She pushed me, I cannot swim." The smiles disappeared. Corinne's face changed for less than a second. Her eyes narrowed, not with fear for me, but with anger that I had refused the version she had offered the room. Then she pressed both hands to her chest and looked around at the guests. "Oh my God, Leah. I did not know you would panic like that." "You knew I could not swim," I said. A sharp cough cut off the rest. Jocelyn steadied me while someone shouted for towels. Another guest said an ambulance was on the way. That was when I noticed Marin. Adrian's 15-year-old daughter stood several feet behind Corinne. She was pale and perfectly still. She did not look surprised. She looked recognized. When Corinne turned toward her, Marin took one deliberate step backward. Corinne saw it too. "Marin, sweetheart, go find your father," she said, using the soft public voice that had made donors trust her and parents praise her work with vulnerable teenagers. Marin did not answer. She pulled her phone closer to her body and moved toward the atrium doors without taking her eyes off Corinne. To my right, Mallory Kent, Corinne's maid of honor, stood on a blue mosaic tile near the deep end. She held her phone so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. 10 minutes earlier, she had insisted that Corinne and I take one last sister picture beside that exact tile. She had adjusted my position twice, asking me to move 6 inches closer to the water. Now she stared down at the tile, as if it had accused her aloud. Hotel security arrived before the paramedics. 2 officers in dark suits separated the crowd and asked everyone to step back. A manager crouched near me and asked whether I had fallen. "No," I said. "My sister pushed me from behind." Corinne gave a strained laugh. "That is not what happened. We were playing around." The manager looked at her, then back at me. "Did you consent to being pushed into the pool?" "No, I did not." "Did she know you could not swim?" "Yes, she knew." One of the security officers spoke into his radio and requested police in addition to the ambulance. The moment he said it, my mother moved forward. Lorraine Holloway had spent most of her life entering rooms as if she had already been chosen to lead them. Even in a silver formal gown, with her younger daughter's wedding collapsing behind her, she approached security with the confidence of someone correcting an employee. "This is a family misunderstanding," she said. "There is no reason to involve the police." The security officer did not move. "The guest has reported an intentional assault. My daughters have always been dramatic with each other. I wiped water from my mouth. Do not describe this for me. Lorraine looked down at me, and the concern disappeared from her face. Leah, think about what you are doing. This is your sister's wedding. I know where I am. Her phone sounded with the soft chime of an incoming audio message. She looked at the screen, silenced it immediately, and walked several steps toward the hallway. At the time, I assumed she wanted privacy from the crowd. Months later, a forensic report would show that the audio message had been saved and synchronized to her laptop. My father tried a different approach. Malcolm crouched beside the hotel manager, lowering his voice as if they were two reasonable men managing irrational women. Corinne made a foolish joke, he said. No one intended harm. Leah has always been frightened of water. The manager glanced at me. That will be included as your statement, sir. Malcolm frowned. I am explaining what happened. No, I said. You are explaining what you want written down. Jocelyn squeezed my shoulder. I had known her for more than a decade, and she understood exactly what I needed without asking. She pulled a small black notebook from her purse. Outside her full-time job, she managed community events on weekends and had developed the habit of documenting names, times, and vendor problems before anyone could argue about them later. She began writing down the names of the people who had pulled me from the pool, the time security arrived, and which guests had been standing closest to Corinne. Mallory saw her and quickly turned away. The paramedics entered with a stretcher and oxygen. One of them checked my breathing while another wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. My chest hurt more each time I inhaled, and I could not stop coughing. I want the report to say she pushed me, I told the security officer. Not that I fell. Not that we were playing. It will say that you reported an intentional push, he said. And preserve the camera footage. The manager nodded. We will flag it now. You can send a written preservation request as soon as possible. Corinne stepped toward me. Security blocked her before she reached the stretcher. Can I speak to my sister alone? She asked. The officer looked at me. I do not consent to that, I said. Corinne's eyes filled with tears on command. Leah, I am sorry you got scared. I would never hurt you. That is not an apology for what you did. Lorraine came back from the hallway. Your sister's marriage has existed for less than an hour, and you are already destroying it. I looked at her wet shoes, then at Corinne's dry wedding dress. Her marriage is not my responsibility. My medical care and the police report are. Malcolm stood. You are making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I am refusing to make it smaller. The police arrived as the paramedics prepared to move me. An Anne Arundel County officer asked me a short series of questions while another spoke with hotel security. I gave my name, described where I had been standing, and stated that Corinne had placed both hands on my back and pushed me toward the deep end. Did she know you could not swim? The officer asked. She has known since we were children. A fragment of another body of water flashed through me, gray wood beneath my bare feet, cold lake water closing over my head. My father's hand pressing a pen between my fingers afterward. I forced my attention back to the officer. I want to give a full statement at the hospital, I said. I am having trouble breathing. That is fine, we will meet you there. I did not ask them to arrest Corinne. I did not demand that the wedding be shut down. I understood enough about crisis response to know that shouting for the largest possible consequence was not the same as protecting the truth. What mattered first was that an independent record existed before my family could rewrite the night. The ambulance ride to the hospital took about 15 minutes. Jocelyn followed in her car after giving security her contact information. By the time we reached the emergency department, my wet dress had been replaced by a hospital gown, and my throat had swollen into a painful rasp. The doctor listened to my lungs, ordered observation, and later sent me for a chest image because of the coughing and chest discomfort. He did not declare that Corinne had committed a crime. The medical note recorded what I reported. My sister had intentionally pushed me into the deep end of a pool. I could not swim, and I had inhaled water before guests pulled me out. That distinction mattered. Facts did not become weaker because they were recorded carefully. The police officer arrived after midnight. With Jocelyn seated beside me, I gave a full recorded statement. I described Mallory positioning me on the blue tile. I described Corinne approaching from behind. I described the pressure of both hands against my upper back and the direction of the push. I gave the names I knew and told him Jocelyn had written down the others. When he asked whether there had been previous violence between Corinne and me, I hesitated. The old lake returned in pieces. A splintered railing. My sister's face above the water. My mother saying I would ruin everything if I told the deputy what really happened. There was an incident when we were younger, I said. I need time before I discuss it fully. The officer did not press. Tell us when you are ready. For tonight, we will document this event. Using Jocelyn's phone, I emailed the hotel manager a formal request to preserve all camera footage from the atrium, pool deck, service hallway, lobby, and elevators for the hours surrounding the reception. I copied the police case number into the message. Then I sent one brief email to Corinne, Lorraine, and Malcolm. Do not contact me by phone or in person. Any necessary communication must be in writing or through counsel. My mother replied within 4 minutes. You are punishing the entire family because you were embarrassed. I did not answer. At around 3 in the morning, my coughing finally eased enough for me to speak without stopping after every few words. Jocelyn remained in the chair beside my bed, her damp hair pulled into a knot, the black notebook open on her lap. Mallory left the hotel before the police finished taking names, she told me. I wrote down the license plate of the car that picked her up. Did Corinne leave? I do not know. Security stopped giving me information once we left. At 3:45, Jocelyn's phone vibrated on the tray table. The message was from Adrian. Leah, I am sorry. I took Marin somewhere safe. I spoke with hotel security and gave them my contact information. I heard something after you were taken from the pool. I will explain in the morning. I read it twice. A second message arrived from the hotel security supervisor confirming that Adrian had left with Marin and had provided a statement and contact information before departing. He had not taken Corinne with him. Months later, I would learn that he had also placed his wedding ring in the hotel safe and signed a property receipt before driving Marin to his sister's home in Colombia. That detail entered the divorce record. I did not know it that night. All I knew was that Corinne's marriage had cracked open before dawn, and whatever Adrian had heard was serious enough to make him choose his daughter and leave his bride behind. I stared at his unfinished promise to explain and felt the old lake pressing against the edges of my memory. By morning, I would learn that the pool at the wedding was not the first one Corinne had used to test how much fear another person could survive. By the time the emergency physician agreed to discharge me, daylight had turned the hospital window the color of wet concrete. I had spent the night coughing into a plastic basin, answering the same medical questions, and learning how much effort a single full breath could require. The chest image showed no immediate complication, but the doctor warned me that symptoms could worsen after water aspiration. If I developed a fever, increasing shortness of breath, confusion, or heavier chest pain, I was to return immediately. He told me to rest, avoid strenuous activity, and have someone stay close for the next 24 hours. My voice had dropped to a hoarse whisper. My ribs hurt when I coughed. My head felt packed with sand, and the skin beneath my eyes burned from chlorine and lost sleep. I was not walking out of that hospital ready to battle anyone. I was walking out with written instructions, a police case number, and Jocelyn carrying my ruined dress in a sealed plastic bag. That was enough for one morning. Before the nurse removed my identification band, she asked whom the hospital could speak to about my treatment. I authorized Jocelyn for practical updates and signed a release allowing the attorney I intended to hire to request copies of my records. I did not authorize my parents or Corinne. Lorraine arrived at the front desk before we left. I did not see her. Jocelyn did. The visitor list I had requested kept her outside the treatment area, and when she demanded to know whether I was still there, the receptionist refused to tell her anything. She said she was your mother, Jocelyn told me, as she helped me into her car. She is, I said. Jocelyn looked at me over the roof. That was not the question. I understood what she meant. Being my mother did not entitle Lorraine to my medical information, my room number, or access to me while I was exhausted enough to be pressured. Jocelyn drove me to my townhouse in Crofton. I spent most of the ride with the seat reclined, a folded towel behind my neck and a paper cup of water in my hands. Gray March rain streaked the windows. Every time tires hissed across standing water, my shoulders tightened before I could stop them. At my house, Jocelyn set an alarm for my medication, made tea I could barely taste, and put my phone on the dining table rather than beside the couch. "You do not have to answer anyone today," she said. "I need to know what they are saying. You need to know what they put in writing. That is different." She was right. 10 minutes later, my mother provided exactly that. The email subject read, "Family Statement Urgent." Lorraine had copied Corinne, Malcolm, Adrian, the wedding coordinator, and a public relations consultant connected to Bright Harbor. The draft below described the incident as a celebratory prank that resulted in an unexpected panic response. It said Corinne had believed I could remain afloat long enough for nearby guests to assist me. It thanked the hotel staff and asked everyone to respect the family's privacy while the newlyweds recovered from an emotionally distressing misunderstanding. The statement never said Corinne pushed me without warning. It never said she knew I could not swim. It did not mention the ambulance, the police report, or the fact that Adrian had left with Marin. At the bottom, Lorraine had added a private note to me. "Leah, your refusal to calm this down will damage Bright Harbor, Corinne's marriage, and the family's reputation. Please reply, approved, so we can release this before rumors spread." I read the message twice, not because it was complicated, but because it was so familiar. My family had always treated language like wet cement. Whoever pressed their version into it first got to decide the shape after it hardened. I replied to everyone copied, "I do not approve this statement. Corinne intentionally pushed me into the deep end of the pool without my consent. She knew I could not swim. I required emergency evaluation and filed a police report. Do not issue any statement in my name or imply that I agreed to this version." I forwarded the full email chain to the detective assigned to the case. Then I sent it to the attorney whose office had returned Jocelyn's early morning message. I did not post it online. I did not call the wedding guests. I did not threaten Bright Harbor. Corinne had spent years surviving by turning every conflict into a contest of emotion. I was not going to hand her a public outburst she could edit into proof that I was unstable. Around noon, Adrian texted to ask whether I was able to speak. He said Marin's mother knew where they were and had agreed to a brief video call, but Marin did not want to appear on camera. I told him to call. His face appeared on my laptop a few minutes later. He had changed out of his wedding clothes. His eyes were swollen, and there was a small room behind him with pale walls and a child's framed drawings. I assumed he was at his sister's house in Colombia because that was what hotel security had recorded. I did not ask for the address. "Marin is here," he said. "She can hear me. She does not want to be seen. That is her choice." A quiet voice beyond the camera said, "Thank you." Adrian lowered his eyes before he began. After I had been taken toward the ambulance, he had gone looking for Marin. He found her near the service corridor behind the atrium. Before he reached her, he heard Corinne and Lorraine speaking through a door that had not closed completely. "Tell me exactly what you heard," I said. "Do not summarize it." He nodded. Corinne said, "She went rigid, exactly like Marin did." Lorraine said, "Not here, Corinne." The room around me seemed to narrow. "What had Corinne told you about Marin?" "That she did not see what happened in the water," he said. Adrian explained that 4 months earlier, during a weekend at a private rental house, Corinne had offered to help Marin become more comfortable in the pool. Marin later told him Corinne had held her under the surface after she panicked, telling her to stop fighting the water. Corinne claimed Marin had grabbed her, lost control, and invented the rest because she did not want her father to remarry. I asked Corinne whether she saw Marin under the water, Adrian said. She said no. She said she reached the pool after Marin was already climbing out. But last night she described how Marin reacted. "Yes, she did," he said. And Lorraine understood the reference. Yes, she understood it. I made him repeat the words one more time. Not because I doubted him, but because exact language mattered now. "Will you give that statement to the detective under oath?" "I already told hotel security I heard something connected to an earlier incident. I will give the police everything." Marin spoke again from beyond the screen. "Tell her the rest." Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. "After Marin told me what happened, I called your mother. I felt anger sharpen my exhaustion." "Why did you call Lorraine?" "I wanted to know whether Corinne had ever done anything dangerous around water before." "And what did my mother say?" She told me there had been an accident when you and Corinne were younger. She said Corinne called for help and that you blamed her afterward because you were embarrassed. She said you had a history of turning fear into accusations. Jocelyn, sitting across from me, stopped writing. Adrian continued. I believed the explanation that made my life easier. I told Maren she had misunderstood. I made her apologize to Corinne. You did not misunderstand your daughter, I said. You chose not to believe her. He did not defend himself. I know, he said. No, you know now. She knew then. His face tightened, but he nodded. You are right. I looked toward the edge of the laptop screen, where Maren remained out of view. I am not going to tell your story for you, I said. I am not going to ask you questions or decide what your words mean. When you are ready, you deserve someone independent whose job is to protect you. Okay, she said. Adrian asked whether I could forgive him enough to accept his statement. That is not the same question, I said. I do not have to forgive you to use truthful evidence. Give your statement because your daughter deserved to be believed the first time, not because you want me to make you feel better now. He agreed to speak with the detective that afternoon. The next morning, March 17th, Jocelyn drove me to a small law office near downtown Annapolis. I moved slowly, wore flat shoes, and carried the hospital discharge packet in a folder because coughing still made my chest ache. The attorney, Denise Walker, handled civil injury claims and institutional misconduct cases. She made one thing clear before accepting my retainer. The police and the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney decide the criminal process, she said. You can cooperate, provide evidence, and correct false information. You cannot order an arrest or select charges. I do not want to run the criminal case. What do you want? I want the first accurate record to survive longer than my family's version. That answer seemed to satisfy her. I paid a $7,500 retainer from savings for the immediate preservation work, records review, and communication with the hotel and Bright Harbor. Any later personal injury claim would be handled under a separate contingency agreement. It was a serious amount of money for me, but it did not endanger my mortgage or require a miraculous source of cash. Denise confirmed that the hotel had locked the relevant footage against routine deletion. The detective had scheduled separate interviews with Adrian and Mallory. No one had promised me what the video showed, and no one had arrested Corinne. That is normal, Denise said. Good cases are built before they are announced. Before we finished, she placed a printed email on the table. This arrived for you through the publisher's fact-checker. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had received a short request asking me to confirm several family details for Corinne's memoir. One question referred to the Deep Creek Lake rescue. I had replied that I would not verify the passage because it did not match my memory. I had assumed the publisher would remove my name or ask for clarification. Instead, the fact-checker had now sent the full chapter. The title was The Day Water Taught Me Courage. I had heard Corinne use that phrase in speeches. I thought it referred to a vague childhood scare she had polished into a lesson for donors. I had never attended her major fundraising events, and she had never sent me the full story. The chapter used my name. Corinne wrote that she saw me slip from a dock, dove in despite being only 17, kept my face above water, and called for help while our parents stood frozen in shock. She described holding me until an employee arrived. She claimed that watching my helplessness inspired her to devote her life to protecting frightened young people. I read the pages without speaking. The scene was detailed enough to sound remembered. The weather, the dock, the rented house, even the color of my shirt were real. Only the hero had been invented. Near the end, Corinne wrote that I had later thanked her for saving my life and told her she had been braver than anyone in our family. I had never said those words. Denise asked whether I wanted to stop. No, keep going, I said. The next pages showed where the story had traveled. The chapter referenced awards, grant applications, speaking engagements, and Bright Harbor's founding materials. Corinne had not merely lied about one afternoon. She had turned my fear into professional property. Until that moment, I had believed the wedding push was meant to humiliate me and test Adrian. Now I understood what my refusal to approve the memoir had threatened. Corinne had pushed me into the pool because she needed the room to see me as unstable before anyone asked why I had refused to confirm the story that built her career. I closed the chapter and placed both hands flat on the table. I need to tell you what really happened at Deep Creek Lake, I said. The first time Corinne stood beside deep water and watched me disappear. There had been no wedding guests to pull out their phones, no hotel cameras, and no detective waiting at a hospital. There had only been my family, a deputy's report, and a pen my father forced into my hand. The chlorine stayed in my hair through 2 showers. By Tuesday morning, every time I turned my head, I caught the chemical smell beneath the shampoo. The cut hospital bracelet lay beside my discharge papers on the kitchen table. Its white plastic strip curled like something shed from my skin. I sat across from Denise Walker with Corinne's memoir chapter spread between us and marked every sentence that was false. She did not dive after me. She did not hold my face above water. Our parents were not frozen with fear. I had never thanked her for saving me. By the time I reached the final page, the margins were crowded with notes. Jocelyn sat beside me, her black notebook open on her knee. Why did you never correct this before? I did not know she had told it this way. You knew she talked about a water accident. I thought she said it taught her compassion. I did not know she had made herself the rescuer. Jocelyn watched me for a moment. And the actual incident? I looked at Denise instead of answering. She closed the office door. Anything you tell me is confidential unless you authorize me to share it. But if there is a document with your signature that contradicts what you say now, I need to know before Corinne's lawyer puts it in front of us. There is, I said. At least there was. The plastic bracelet pressed against my wrist in my mind. The office carpet disappeared beneath a strip of sun-bleached dock. The chlorine in my hair became lake water and gasoline from the marina pumps. I was 23 again, standing barefoot at Deep Creek Lake in July of 2009 while my sister told me I had ruined her future. Corinne was 17 that summer. She had applied for a scholarship, sponsored by a local civic foundation, and claimed she had spent the school year volunteering with a student outreach program where I occasionally worked during graduate school. She had attended twice. On the application, she wrote that she had volunteered every week. When the scholarship committee called me to verify her hours, I told them the truth. Corinne lost her place as a finalist. Our parents had rented a house near the lake for a week, and Lorraine spent the first 2 days treating me as if I had reported my own sister to the police. You could have said you did not remember, she told me. They asked me a direct question. She is 17. That does not make the answer different. Malcolm said almost nothing, which was how he expressed agreement with my mother while preserving the appearance of neutrality. On the third afternoon, I walked down to the marina to return a life jacket Malcolm had rented and left near the house. I did not wear it. I was not planning to enter the water, and I had avoided deep water since childhood because I had never learned to swim. Corinne followed me onto the dock. The marina was busy, but not crowded. A boat engine idled near the fuel station. Someone hammered against metal farther down the slips. The dock beneath us was hot enough to sting the soles of my feet. Corinne stopped behind me and said, "You enjoyed it." I turned. Enjoyed what? Making them reject me. You lied on the application. You could have protected me. Protecting you would have required me to lie. Her face changed. The wounded younger sister disappeared, leaving something flatter beneath it. You always need to be right, she said. No, you need everyone else to be wrong for noticing what you do. I picked up the life jacket and turned toward the marina office. Both of her hands struck my upper back. There was no stumble, no loose board, and no accident. The push lifted one of my feet completely off the dock. I hit the water shoulder first and sank before I could draw a breath. Cold closed around my head. My body went rigid instead of fighting upward. I could hear the boat engine and the dull thud of music from the rental houses, but I could not tell where the surface was. My dress wrapped around my knees. When I opened my mouth, lake water rushed in. For several seconds, Corinne did nothing. I know that because I surfaced once. My face broke through the water long enough for me to see her standing above me. She had one hand gripping the dock post. Her eyes were wide, but she was not calling for help. Then she looked past me. A man in a marina shirt was running toward us. Only then did Corinne scream. My sister fell in. She cannot swim. The man dropped his radio, kicked off his shoes, and jumped. His name was Tyler Boone. He was 27 and worked summer maintenance at the marina. He reached me from the side, locked an arm beneath my shoulders, and dragged me toward the ladder while I coughed against his sleeve. Tyler never saw Corinne push me. By the time he looked toward the dock, I was already in the water. That fact mattered later. Marina staff called emergency services. A deputy arrived with the paramedics and took down our names. I refused transport to the hospital after my breathing stabilized, but the paramedics brought me into the Marina's first aid clinic for observation. The deputy asked each adult to describe what had happened. Because the Marina also needed written accounts for its insurer, the manager handed us accident forms and said they would be included with the rental property information. At the top of mine, I wrote the date, the dock number, and my contact information. In the space-marked description of incident, I wrote one sentence. Corinne pushed me from behind. Corinne wrote that I stepped backward while arguing and lost my balance. Lorraine said she had not witnessed the fall but heard Corinne call for help. Malcolm described it as an accident. Tyler wrote that he saw me in the water, saw Corinne on the dock, and heard her call for help only after he began running toward us. He did not claim to know how I entered the water. The deputy made his own incident note, recorded that the family accounts conflicted, and told me I could make a formal complaint. Corinne was a minor. I was exhausted, coughing, and surrounded by 3 people insisting I had misunderstood a physical act I had felt with my own body. I still said I wanted my account preserved. Malcolm offered to return the Marina forms after adding the rental policy number and insurance details. The manager knew him as the person who had booked the house, so he handed Malcolm the packet. That evening, my father placed a new sheet of paper in front of me at the rental house. It was labeled Supplemental Statement for Property Insurer. The paragraph said I had become upset during an argument, stepped backward, and lost my balance. It said Corinne immediately called for help and remained on the dock, only because she could not safely enter the water. I pushed it away. That is not what happened. Malcolm sat across from me at the dining table. It is a less emotional description. It is a lie. It prevents a family accident from becoming a criminal accusation against a 17-year-old. She pushed me. Lorraine stood near the kitchen counter with her arms folded. Your father and I are paying the deposit on your apartment when classes begin. We are covering part of your tuition. We are not financing someone who is determined to destroy her sister. I looked at Malcolm. Are you threatening to make me homeless because I wrote what happened? He did not meet my eyes. You can support yourself if you insist on behaving like an independent adult. They had spent years reminding me that graduate school was possible because of their generosity. My teaching assistant's stipend covered food and basic expenses, but not tuition and housing. The lease for my fall apartment required a guarantor. Malcolm had already signed the preliminary forms. Lorraine placed my original handwritten statement beside her purse. If you accuse Corinne, she said, we will tell the deputy you have been unstable since childhood. We will tell your university you are having another episode. You will spend months defending yourself while your sister loses her future. I do not have episodes. You panic around water. You exaggerate when you are frightened. We have all seen it. For nearly 3 hours, I refused. I asked to call the deputy. Malcolm took the house phone from the table and said I could use it after I calmed down. I tried to leave, but Lorraine reminded me that my car keys were in Malcolm's pocket because he had driven us back from the Marina. Corinne sat on the stairs where she could hear everything. She never apologized. Near midnight, I signed the supplemental statement. My hand shook so badly that the first letter of my last name looked broken. Malcolm mailed that version to the rental insurer the next morning. Lorraine kept my original handwritten form in what she called the family records box. The supplemental statement was not sworn testimony. It was not a police statement, and it did not erase the deputy's note that our accounts conflicted, but it became the document my parents showed whenever the lake incident surfaced. It was the paper Corinne used to call me a liar. When the office returned around me, Denise had stopped taking notes. I signed it, I said. No one forged my name. Jocelyn's expression was painful but steady. You were coerced. Yes, that explains why you signed. It does not erase what happened afterward. The truth was uncomfortable because both things were real. My parents had used money, housing, transportation, and the threat of declaring me unstable. I had also allowed their version to stand for 16 years. I kept thinking the truth would matter on its own, I said. I thought refusing to repeat the lie was different from exposing it. Denise leaned forward. Corinne's lawyer will use that signature. Our advantage is telling the complete truth before they do. I gave her access to an old email account from graduate school. The messages showed my parents discussing tuition, the apartment deposit, and my need to repair the damage after the lake. None of them contained a direct written threat, but the dates supported my account of the pressure. Denise arranged for me to meet the detective again on March 20th. I told him about the Marina form, the supplemental insurance statement, the deputy's note, and Tyler Boone. I do not expect you to reopen an incident from 2009, I said. I am telling you because Corinne may produce a signed statement claiming I admitted I fell. He requested the old county incident records and asked the Marina's current management whether archived insurance documents still existed. Tyler's name appeared in the original incident log, along with the detail that he had begun moving toward the water before Corinne called out. It did not prove he saw the push. He had not. It proved her call for help was delayed. On Friday afternoon, Denise called me back to her office. The detective joined by phone. Marin's mother and Adrian had agreed to work with a child advocate who had helped preserve the messages on you. Without Leah, Adrian, or Corinne handling the device, the detective read one message aloud because it referred directly to me. Corinne had sent it 4 months earlier, after the incident at the rental house. You froze just like Leah. That is what happens when you fight the water. I stared at the speaker on Denise's desk. Corinne had told Adrian she arrived after Marin was already climbing out of the pool. She claimed she had not seen Marin underwater and could not know whether the girl froze, kicked, or fought. The message proved she had seen enough to compare Marin's reaction to mine. It also told me something worse. Corinne had not simply discovered that fear could silence people. She had repeated the same conditions and studied whether the second person reacted like the first. She uses the panic afterward, I said. Once someone freezes, she calls that proof they misunderstood what happened. The detective did not agree or disagree. That is an interpretation. We will document what the message says and let Marin describe the event in her own words. He was right. For most of my life, other people had taken my fear and explained it for me. I was not going to do the same thing to Marin, even if I believed I recognized the pattern. That evening, the child advocate sent Denise a short procedural update. Marin was willing to complete a forensic interview. Her mother had consented. Adrian had agreed to remain outside unless requested. Marin had added one condition of her own. Neither her father nor I was allowed to explain what we thought her story meant. For the first time, Corinne would not get to define the frightened person in the water. Neither would anyone else. Marin chose the chair closest to the door. The room at the Child Advocacy Center had been designed to look harmless. Pale blue walls, a low bookshelf, a bowl of wrapped candy no one touched. Even the clock had been placed high enough that a child would not spend the entire interview watching the minutes pass. Marin noticed the exit before she noticed anything else. She sat with her phone pressed between both palms, 1 foot angled toward the hallway. Adrian took the chair farthest from her. Her mother sat beside the advocate, close enough to offer support but not close enough to crowd her. I was there because Marin had asked me to attend the opening conversation. I would not be allowed into the forensic interview itself, and I did not want to be. Whatever she said needed to belong to her, not to me, Adrian, or anyone trying to connect her experience to mine. The advocate explained the process in plain language. Marin could ask for a break. She could say she did not understand a question. She could correct the interviewer. She did not have to guess, and no one would punish her for saying she did not remember. Marin looked at me. What happens if they do not believe me? I chose my words carefully. You do not have to prove anything to me. Tell what you remember in your own words. Do not add details because you think an adult wants them, and do not remove details because someone might be upset. Adrian shifted in his chair. Marin looked at him, then back at me. And nobody gets to explain it for me afterward? Not me, I said. Not your father, not Corinne. The advocate added, you will be told who receives the interview and why. The adults may make legal decisions, but they do not get to change your answers. Marin gave a small nod and stood. She carried her phone into the interview room herself. The door closed behind her, and Adrian pressed both hands between his knees. I could see that he wanted to speak, but for once he seemed to understand that his discomfort was not the emergency. Marin's mother went outside to call her attorney. The advocate remained in the hallway, watching through a secure monitor that I could not see. I sat across from Adrian in the waiting area. I keep hearing what I said to her, he told me. What did you say? That Corinne was trying to help, that panic could distort memory, that accusations could destroy a person's reputation. The words sounded too much like Lorraine. Did my mother give you that language? Some of it. And the rest? He looked toward the closed door. The rest came from me. That answer mattered more than an excuse would have. The interview lasted almost 2 hours, including 2 breaks. I never saw the recording. Later that day, with written authorization from Marin's mother and under rules set by the advocate, Denise received a limited summary containing only the information relevant to the investigations. Corinne had offered to teach Marin how to float during a weekend at a private rental house 4 months before the wedding. There was no lifeguard. The pool had no visible security camera, and no other adult had been on the deck when the lesson began. Marin told the interviewer that Corinne asked her to lie on her back and place her trust in the person supporting her. At first, Corinne held one hand beneath Marin's shoulders and another beneath her lower back. When Marin became nervous and tried to sit up, Corinne told her she was resisting because she liked being afraid. Then Corinne changed her grip. She held one of Marin's wrists and pressed down near her shoulder. Marin's face went beneath the surface. When she fought upward, Corinne told her to stop struggling and let the water teach her that panic was a choice. Marin could not say exactly how long she had been held under. Frightened people do not carry stopwatches in their heads. She remembered swallowing water, striking Corinne's arm, and hearing Corinne laugh when she reached the side of the pool. She also remembered Corinne saying, "Now you know how much worse you make things when you fight." When Adrian came outside, Corinne was holding a towel around Marin's shoulders. She told him Marin had panicked during a normal floating exercise and grabbed her hard enough to frighten them both. Marin said she told her father the truth that night. He asked whether she might have confused Corinne supporting her with Corinne holding her down. Marin said no. He asked again the next morning. She still said no. 3 days later, after Lorraine called Adrian, he made Marin apologize for accusing Corinne of something dangerous. The summary did not call Corinne guilty. It did not diagnose Marin or interpret her emotions. It recorded what she remembered, what she did not know, and what happened afterward. That restraint made it stronger. After the interview, the advocate asked whether Marin wanted to leave through a separate exit. She said she wanted to speak to Adrian first, but only if her mother and I remained in the room. Adrian sat across from his daughter. "I believed the explanation that protected the wedding," he said. "I told myself I was being fair, but I was asking you to make my life easier. I made you apologize to someone you said had hurt you." Marin twisted the edge of her sleeve. "Are you sorry because she pushed Leah? Or because you believe me now?" "Both. That is not the same thing." "No," he said. "It is not." She looked at him for several seconds. "You keep saying you should have known. You should have listened." "I already told you." Adrian nodded. "You did. I do not want to hear that you forgive yourself. I will not ask you to help me do that." He told her he would attend counseling with her if and when she chose, and that he would follow whatever boundaries she and her mother set regarding contact. He did not ask for a hug. He did not tell her families survive mistakes. He did not promise that one apology would repair what he had broken. I respected that, but respect was not forgiveness. When we stepped into the hallway, Adrian tried to thank me for being there. "Do not turn me into the reason you finally listened to your daughter," I said. "She was telling the truth before I went into that pool." "I know." "Then act like it after everyone stops watching." He accepted that without argument. 3 days later, the digital evidence technician met with Marin, her mother, the advocate, and their attorney. Adrian was permitted to attend the opening explanation, but did not touch the phone. I was not present. The technician created a forensic copy of the relevant message threads and preserved timestamps, account identifiers, attachments, and deletion records. Denise later received copies through the proper evidence-sharing process. I never held Marin's phone, never asked for her password, and never told her which messages mattered. The verified conversation was worse than the screenshot Adrian had first described. The morning after the rental house incident, Marin had texted Corinne. "You held me under after I tried to get up." Corinne replied, "I stopped you from hurting yourself." Marin wrote, "You did not let me breathe." Corinne answered, "You froze just like Leah." That is what happens when you fight the water. 4 minutes later, Corinne sent another message. "Your father is finally happy. Do not make adults afraid of you because you cannot control your reactions." The wording was almost clinical. Corinne had learned to describe cruelty as care and fear as misconduct. She did not need to call Marin a liar directly. She only needed to suggest that the girl's reaction made her dangerous to the adults around her. The metadata confirmed the messages came from Corinne's account. They had not been edited, forwarded from another device, or assembled from isolated screenshots. They also destroyed her claim that she had arrived after Marin left the water. Corinne knew Marin froze. She knew Marin fought the water. She knew enough to compare the girl's response to mine. Adrian received the evidence through his own attorney. He called Denise rather than contacting me directly, and asked whether he could provide an additional statement. In that statement, he admitted that Corinne had denied seeing Marin underwater. He also admitted that Lorraine had called him privately before he required Marin to apologize. Until then, I had assumed my mother's involvement was limited to reassuring Adrian that Corinne had no history of dangerous behavior. It was not. Marin told the advocate that Lorraine had called her directly the day after speaking with Adrian. The advocate allowed one portion of that disclosure to be shared because it showed potential pressure on a minor witness. Lorraine had said, "Your father has been alone for a long time. Sometimes young people mistake fear for harm. If you keep insisting on this, you may destroy the happiest thing that has happened to him." Marin asked whether Lorraine believed Corinne. Lorraine answered, "I believe families survive when people stop repeating the worst version of a mistake." The sentence was polished enough to sound compassionate. I had heard versions of it my entire life. Do not repeat the worst version. Do not destroy someone's future. Do not make fear into an accusation. The language changed depending on the audience. The purpose never did. Adrian searched his email and found a message Lorraine had sent him that same afternoon. "Do not reward attention-seeking by delaying the wedding. Marin needs reassurance, but she also needs to understand that serious accusations create serious consequences." She had not merely answered Adrian's questions. She had instructed him how to treat his daughter's disclosure. Denise forwarded the email to the detective, Marin's attorney, and the independent child safety consultant advising Bright Harbor's insurer. The detective asked Adrian and Lorraine for separate interviews. Lorraine agreed only through counsel. For several days, nothing public happened. Corinne continued presenting herself as a newlywed, whose husband had abandoned her after a family misunderstanding. Bright Harbor released a statement saying she had temporarily stepped back from public events to focus on her marriage and personal well-being. The statement did not mention me or Marin. My mother sent one email through her attorney. Lorraine denies pressuring any child. Her communications were intended to reduce emotional escalation during a difficult family transition. I did not reply. On March 29th, Denise called and asked whether I recognized the name Celeste Ruiz. I did. Celeste had worked as a program director at Bright Harbor until the previous year. Corinne told people she left after becoming overwhelmed by the emotional demands of working with traumatized teenagers. Celeste had contacted the publisher's attorney after learning that Corinne's memoir had been paused. The publisher directed her to Denise because some of her documents referred to Lorraine and to the same language used in Corinne's origin story. Celeste did not ask to speak with me directly. She sent a message through counsel first. I agreed to meet at Denise's office on the condition that Celeste bring her own attorney or receive independent advice before handing over anything covered by her separation agreement. I did not want another woman to surrender control of her story, because my case needed evidence. Celeste arrived on March 31st carrying a slim accordion folder. She was composed until Denise asked whether she wanted the door left partly open. "Yes," she said immediately. "Please." She chose the chair nearest the doorway, the same way Marin had. Celeste explained that during a staff retreat, Corinne asked everyone to share a fear that prevented them from becoming stronger leaders. Celeste disclosed that she had severe claustrophobia after being trapped in an elevator as a child. 2 weeks later, Corinne asked her to retrieve donated supplies from a storage room at Bright Harbor. When Celeste stepped inside, Corinne pulled the door shut and held it from the outside. At first, Celeste thought the lock had jammed. Then she heard Corinne speaking through the door. "You cannot lead frightened children if a small room controls you. Celeste begel her to open it." Corinne told her to breathe through the fear. When another employee approached, Corinne released the door and claimed Celeste had experienced a panic attack during a routine task. Later, she told the board that Celeste's instability created a risk for the teenagers in their care. Celeste opened the accordion folder. Inside were her original written complaint, emails to Lorraine, the board's response, and the separation agreement she had been pressured to sign. Her attorney had already reviewed it. The agreement contained a non-disparagement clause, but it did not prevent her from reporting dangerous conduct to law enforcement, insurers, regulators, or an authorized investigator. "Why come forward now?" I asked. "Because I thought I was the exception," she said. "Then I read that Corinne pushed you into a pool and called your reaction the problem." She slid the first email across the table. "I can prove she learns what people fear," Celeste said. "Then she creates the fear herself and uses their panic as evidence that they are unstable." Celeste's original complaint was 7 pages long. She had written it the morning after Corinne locked her in the storage room. The first page listed the date, time, names of the employees present, and the exact words Corinne used through the door. The remaining pages documented the panic attack, the colleague who found her on the floor, and the urgent care visit that followed. Celeste had not written like a disgruntled employee. She had written like a program director who understood that details disappeared when powerful people wanted them to. Denise placed the complaint beside the separation agreement. "Did the board interview the colleague who found you?" "No," Celeste said. "Lorraine told me the board wanted to resolve the matter privately before it damaged donor confidence." Celeste's attorney opened a second folder containing email printouts. "The agreement has a non-disparagement clause. It does not prohibit my client from cooperating with law enforcement, an insurer, a regulator, or an authorized safeguarding investigation." One email had been sent by Lorraine to the chair of Bright Harbor's board. Celeste's emotional reaction has obscured the intent of a leadership exercise. Corinne attempted to help her confront a known limitation, but Celeste interpreted the experience through unresolved childhood trauma. Another described the storage room incident as a training misunderstanding. Lorraine recommended a severance package because Celeste's continued presence might create tension among staff and undermine confidence in Corinne's leadership. The wording was polished, but I recognized the machinery beneath it. Corinne created the fear. The frightened person reacted. Lorraine turned the reaction into evidence that the frightened person could not be trusted. My parents had used the same method after Deep Creek Lake. They never had to prove I lied about the push. They only had to make my panic sound less reliable than Corinne's calmness. Celeste watched me read the messages. She told the board I was too unstable to work with traumatized teenagers. What did she tell the staff? That I left for personal reasons. And the families? That Bright Harbor supported me through a difficult transition. She gave a humorless smile. They made my removal sound like another example of their compassion. The documents included an email from a board member asking whether the storage room door had actually been held shut. Lorraine replied that focusing on mechanics would distract from the broader purpose of the exercise. That sentence stayed with me. Mechanics were where accountability lived. Who touched the door, who applied pressure, who could leave and who could not. Calling those details a distraction allowed Corinne to transform an action into an intention, then demand credit for the intention she claimed to have. Denise asked Celeste whether she was prepared for Bright Harbor to attack her credibility again. "They never stopped," Celeste said. "They only stopped doing it where I could hear." She authorized her attorney to provide the complaint, the board correspondence, and the separation agreement to the detective investigating the wedding incident. She also authorized disclosure to any independent safeguarding investigator appointed by Bright Harbor's insurer. Before she left, she looked at me and said, "I do not want to become the woman in an article who exists only to prove your sister is cruel." "You will not," I said. "Your account belongs to you." "I still want it considered." "It will be considered. It will not be owned." That was the promise I could make. That evening, Jocelyn spread copies of the non-confidential documents across my dining table. My cough had improved, but I still tired faster than I wanted to admit. I had returned to work on a reduced schedule and kept my office door open whenever a colleague stopped by. Ordinary conversations felt strangely valuable after weeks of hearing every sentence measured for legal consequences. Jocelyn tapped Lorraine's email with one finger. You should release this before Corinne does another television interview. Corinne had not spoken publicly about the police investigation, but Bright Harbor's communications consultant had issued 2 statements describing her as a newlywed coping with a private family crisis. Several wedding guests had posted vague messages about compassion and forgiveness. None named me, but the implication was clear. The angry sister was escalating a prank. The abandoned bride was suffering in silence. If we go public now, Corinne will say Celeste coordinated with me, I said. She is already saying that. Privately, there is a difference. Jocelyn sat back. The difference is that she gets time. I know. Time was the cost of using a real process. An investigation moved more slowly than a lie because an investigator had to verify each document, interview each witness separately, and distinguish evidence from interpretation. Going public might have satisfied my anger for a day. It also could have exposed Marin, damaged Celeste's legal position, and allowed Corinne to claim every witness had shaped her story after seeing mine. Bright Harbor still served hundreds of teenagers through counselors, tutors, and community programs who had nothing to do with Corinne's behavior. I did not want the organization handed to me, and I did not want it burned down around the people it was supposed to help. I want her removed from unsupervised contact with minors while the review is pending, I said. I want the complaints examined by someone Lorraine cannot direct. I want the publisher to preserve every interview and draft. After that, we decide what can be said publicly. Jocelyn studied me. You realize restraint is only useful if it protects the case. It is not useful if you are still trying to protect your family. I am not protecting them. Good. Then let the investigators see everything. The next morning, Denise sent separate evidence packets to 3 places. The first went to the Anne Arundel County detective. Celeste's records did not prove what happened at the wedding, but they gave investigators a reason to examine how Corinne responded when someone accused her of exploiting a known fear. The second went to Bright Harbor's liability insurer, whose policy required the organization to cooperate with allegations involving youth safety and leadership misconduct. The insurer appointed an outside safeguarding firm with no prior connection to Corinne or Lorraine. The third went to counsel for Corinne's publisher. Denise requested preservation of the memoir drafts, fact-check correspondence, recorded interviews, promotional materials, and internal discussions concerning the Deep Creek Lake story. I did not demand results. I asked for confirmation that the records would be preserved. By April 8th, Bright Harbor's board notified counsel that it had accepted the outside investigator selected through the insurer. The investigator's scope included Celeste's complaint, board handling of prior employee concerns, Corinne's contact with minors, and the accuracy of statements used in fundraising and public materials. Lorraine formally recused herself from the vote. That sounded responsible, until one board member forwarded the investigator 3 emails Lorraine had sent privately after announcing her recusal. In one, she described Celeste as a former employee with a financial grievance. In another, she warned that restricting Corinne's work with teenagers would validate a coordinated attack led by Leah and Adrian after a failed wedding. In the third, she urged the board to remember that Bright Harbor's identity was inseparable from its founder. Lorraine had stepped out of the room while continuing to direct the conversation from the hallway. Corinne submitted her own written response. According to the copy provided to Denise, she denied holding the storage room door shut. She said Celeste had misunderstood a voluntary exercise and later demanded money. She described Marin as a teenager struggling with her father's remarriage. She described me as an estranged sister who had resented her success for years. She did not deny pushing me. Instead, she said the pool incident had been playful, brief, and surrounded by capable swimmers. She argued that my extreme reaction transformed an innocent moment into something it was never intended to be. Once again, my fear was the crime. The board did not remove her immediately. It imposed temporary safeguards while the investigation continued. Corinne could not meet with minors alone, lead overnight retreats, conduct fear-based exercises, or access complaint files without oversight. An interim executive director took control of daily youth programs, while Corinne retained her title but lost direct operational authority. The programs remained open. That decision disappointed people who wanted a dramatic fall, including part of me. But it protected the teenagers Bright Harbor served while preventing Corinne from supervising them without witnesses. Corinne called the restrictions an insult. I knew that only because the investigator preserved an email she sent to the board. You are allowing a family dispute to dismantle the life's work of a woman who has spent years protecting vulnerable children. She had built a career around the language of protection. Every restriction placed on her could be portrayed as an injury to the children she claimed to represent. The publisher moved faster. On April 11th, its attorney informed Denise that the memoir had been placed on hold pending a factual review. The publisher preserved the raw interview recordings and instructed the ghostwriter not to delete notes, drafts, or source materials. The attorney also sent several passages requiring my response. The lake story appeared in more than the memoir. Bright Harbor had included a shortened version in its founding history. Award nominations described Corinne as a teenager who risked her life to save her older sister. Donor presentations referred to the event as the moment she discovered her calling. One grant narrative stated that Corinne's first-hand experience rescuing a terrified family member gave her unique insight into how fear prevented vulnerable young people from trusting help. My name appeared in 2 internal fact-check packets. I had known Corinne sometimes mentioned a water accident in speeches. I had assumed she used it as a general story about fear and family responsibility. I had never seen her say she entered the lake, held me above the surface, or inspired Tyler Boone to help. The more I read, the clearer the financial structure became. The story gave Corinne moral authority. That authority helped her attract donors, receive awards, secure speaking invitations, and negotiate a book advance worth $120,000. Bright Harbor's public tax filing showed Corinne received roughly $140,000 a year from the organization before her outside speaking income. My terror had become part of her professional resume. I did not claim the lake story alone secured every grant or created the entire organization. Bright Harbor had employees who did real work, and its programs had produced real results. That was what made the lie more dangerous. Corinne had attached herself to something valuable, then trained everyone to believe questioning her would endanger the people the organization served. The publisher asked me to provide a written correction. Denise advised me to answer only what I could personally establish. I wrote that Corinne did not rescue me. Tyler Boone pulled me from the lake. Corinne had been standing on the dock when he approached. I also disclosed the existence of the signed supplemental statement and explained that it did not reflect my original account. I did not hide my signature. A week later, Malcolm made sure no one else could hide it either. The first message came from the publisher's attorney. Malcolm had submitted a scanned document dated July 2009, signed by me, stating that I stepped backward during an argument and accidentally fell from the dock. He called it the only contemporaneous account that mattered. The second came from Bright Harbor's investigator. Corinne had submitted the same scan to challenge my credibility. The third came from a local reporter. Mr. Holloway has provided a statement bearing your signature that contradicts your current allegations. Would you like to respond before publication? The reporter attached the scan. My signature sat beneath words Malcolm had written. It still looked broken at the first letter. I called my supervisor before she could learn about it from the district's communications office. I told her a reporter might connect my name and position to an active family dispute. I provided the police case number, the hospital documentation, and Denise's contact information. I did not discuss Marin or any confidential information involving a minor. My supervisor listened without interrupting. You are not being disciplined, she said. But do not speak on behalf of the district. Do not access student systems for anything connected to this matter, and forward media requests to communications. I understand. Do you need additional leave? I may need a few days. We will document it. There was no dramatic firing, no security escort, and no principal demanding that I prove my innocence by lunch. There was only the uncomfortable reality that my family's lie had reached the professional life I had built away from them. That afternoon, Malcolm sent me an email directly, despite my request that communication go through counsel. You can keep surrounding yourself with lawyers, but your own signature proves what happened. If you continue attacking your sister, I will make sure the school district, every parent you work with, and every reporter covering this understands that you changed your story after 16 years. I can prove you signed the truth, Leah, and I will use it to end this before you destroy Corinne's life. I forwarded the email to Denise without replying. Then I looked again at the statement carrying my name and understood what my father was threatening. Corinne did not need everyone to believe she was innocent. She only needed them to believe I was unreliable enough that the truth could never be settled. My father's threat reached the school district before I returned from leave. The local reporter sent the signed statement to the communications office on a Monday morning and asked whether someone who had changed her account of a serious family incident should oversee student crisis response. By then, I had already disclosed the police case and directed all questions to Denise, but preparation did not make the message painless. My supervisor called me into her office before the first bell. She had printed the reporter's email, my hospital discharge instructions, and the disclosure form I had submitted the previous week. She did not ask me to defend my childhood in front of her. She asked whether any district records, students, or employees were connected to the dispute. No, I said. I have not used district systems, and I have not discussed the case with students. Has anyone threatened to contact families you work with? My father said he would contact parents and reporters. She wrote that down. Forward any message like that to communications and your attorney. Do not answer it from your work account. The district did not suspend me or open an investigation into my personal life. It placed reasonable boundaries around media contact and reminded staff not to speak for the school system. I used 3 additional leave days because I was sleeping poorly and still became short of breath when I climbed stairs too quickly. Those days cost me the stipend from an evening training program I had been scheduled to lead. Denise documented the lost income with the rest of my damages. Nothing about the process was dramatic. No security guards escorted me out. No parent group demanded my resignation. Still, every time someone paused outside my office, I wondered whether Malcolm had sent them the statement bearing my name. That was the damage he understood best. He did not need to prove I was lying. He only needed to introduce enough uncertainty that I would spend my energy explaining myself. Denise told me not to respond to his email. Your father wants engagement, she said. If you correct one claim, he will make 3 more. Let the evidence speak through the investigation. I need to ask him where the original statement is. We can ask through counsel. He will deny having it. Then he can deny it in writing. I knew she was right. Jocelyn knew it too. Neither of them understood why that answer felt insufficient. For 16 years, I had carried one private belief beneath everything else. If Malcolm were forced to look directly at what happened, without Lorraine shaping the language, and without Corinne crying beside him, he would admit that he knew. I did not expect him to become a different father. I wanted one honest sentence. Yes, she pushed you. It was an irrational thing to need from a rational man, which was precisely why I mistook it for unfinished business instead of hope. I asked Denise to arrange a meeting through my parents' attorney. She advised against it unless there was a written agenda and counsel present. My parents refused those conditions. Malcolm said he would speak to his daughter, not participate in an interrogation staged by lawyers. I went anyway. Jocelyn argued with me in my kitchen while I placed my phone, keys, and a small notebook into my purse. You know what they do with information, she said. I am not bringing evidence. You are carrying it in your head. I need to see whether he will deny it to my face. You already know what he believes. I know what he has written. She crossed her arms. That difference matters only to you. It did matter to me. That was the problem. I shared my live location with Jocelyn, scheduled a check-in for 1 hour later, and drove to my parents' house outside Annapolis. I did not bring original documents. Denise knew where I was. I had planned for physical safety and completely underestimated emotional exposure. Lorraine opened the door before I knocked twice. You should not have come without your lawyer if you intend to threaten us, she said. I came because Dad said he would talk to me. Malcolm waited in the living room. He had placed 3 glasses of water on the coffee table, as if this were a normal family discussion. Corinne was not there. I did not touch the water. The house looked exactly as it had before the wedding, except a framed photograph of Adrian and Corinne had been removed from the mantel. A lighter rectangle remained in the dust where it had stood. Malcolm gestured toward the couch. "Sit down. I would rather stand." Lorraine gave a quiet sigh. "This performance is exhausting." I ignored her. "Where is my original Marina statement?" Malcolm folded his hands. "You signed the statement that was submitted." "That was not my question. The insurer received the accurate account. The account you wrote. The account you approved. After you threatened my apartment, tuition, and reputation." Lorraine stepped between us. "We provided support with conditions. Every parent does that. Most parents do not require their adult daughter to change an accident report after her sister pushes her into a lake." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Corinne was 17. I was 23, not disposable. No one said you were. You treated my safety as less important than her scholarship application. That scholarship had already been lost because of you." The sentence came from Lorraine, but Malcolm did not correct it. I looked past her toward the built-in cabinet beside the dining room. One door stood partly open. Inside were gray archival boxes stacked in 2 columns. Each had a white label in Lorraine's handwriting. Bright Harbor Personnel. Donor Complaints. Family Medical. Deep Creek, 2009. Wedding Response, 2025. My breathing changed before my mind caught up. Lorraine followed my gaze and moved quickly to close the cabinet. "What is in those boxes?" I asked. "Nonprofit records," she said. "One says Deep Creek. Old insurance papers. And Wedding Response. Communications, drafts. You told the board you had recused yourself. I am still allowed to preserve records." The boxes were not proof of a crime. Keeping documents was not illegal, and I could not open a cabinet in someone else's home simply because the labels disturbed me. But I remembered Lorraine placing my handwritten Marina statement beside her purse. I remembered the way she saved every version until she knew which one would be most useful. "You kept the original," I said. "I kept family records." "That means yes." Malcolm stood. "You came here to accuse your mother of organizing files?" "I came to ask whether you know Corinne pushed me." He looked toward the closed cabinet, then back at me. I should have stopped there. I should have asked the question and left. Instead, I began telling them what the investigators had. I told them Adrian had given a sworn statement about the hallway conversation. I told them Marin's phone had been preserved independently. I told them Corinne's message proved she saw Marin freeze underwater. I told them Celeste had provided her complaint and board emails. I told them the publisher had frozen the memoir and preserved the raw interviews. Lorraine's expression remained controlled, but her right hand tightened around the cabinet key. Malcolm listened until I finished. Then he said, "How many people are you willing to hurt to prove your sister frightened you?" "She did not frighten me. She pushed me into water knowing I could not swim. You survived." The room went silent. I looked at my father, waiting for him to hear his own words. He continued, "You survived the lake. You survived the wedding. Marin survived whatever happened at that rental house." Celeste walked out of the storage room. "You are trying to destroy a marriage, a nonprofit, and services for hundreds of children over moments that ended without permanent injury. A person does not earn innocence because someone else rescued her victim. That language is exactly why no one can reason with you." "Did you know Corinne pushed me in 2009? He did not say no. He said, "I knew 2 sisters were arguing and one of them ended up in the water." "Did you believe I stepped backward?" "I believed the version that prevented one bad decision from destroying 2 lives." It was the closest he had ever come to admitting the truth. It was also worse than denial. Malcolm had not protected Corinne because he lacked evidence. He had protected her because he believed outcomes mattered more than actions, and because my survival allowed him to calculate my pain as an acceptable cost. Lorraine stepped closer. "Bright Harbor could lose donors because of this. Children will lose counseling. Staff will lose jobs. Is that what you want attached to your name? I want Corinne separated from people whose vulnerabilities she can exploit. You want control. No, I want a process you cannot control." For the first time, Lorraine's composure broke. "You have no idea what is in those records." I looked at the cabinet. "Then why are you afraid I noticed them?" She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Malcolm moved toward the front door and opened it. "This conversation is over." I walked past him, then stopped on the porch. "I came here hoping you would finally choose the truth," I said. That was my mistake. He did not answer. I reached my car before the scheduled check-in and called Jocelyn from the driveway. I told them too much, I said. She was quiet for half a second. Are you safe? Yes. Did you touch anything or take anything? No. Did they admit anything? Not in a way a court would care about. And in a way you care about? I looked at the house through my rearview mirror. Lorraine stood behind the curtain near the cabinet. My father said we all survived. Jocelyn understood immediately. Come home. My second call was to Denise. I told her everything I had disclosed, including the messages, Celeste's complaint, the memoir records, and the existence of the independent review. I also described the labeled gray boxes without claiming to know their contents. Denise did not scold me. That would have been easier. You gave them a map of the investigation, she said. From now on, no direct meetings. No exceptions. I understand. Write a detailed account of the conversation while it is fresh. Include the boxes, labels, exact language, and where everyone stood. Do not embellish. I will. And Leah, wanting your father to admit the truth is not evidence that he ever will. I know that now. Within hours of my visit, Corinne and Lorraine began contacting wedding guests. I did not witness those calls. I learned about them months later through call logs, saved messages, and records Lorraine had preserved. At the time, I only saw the effects. 2 guests who had initially told hotel security that Corinne pushed me sent revised statements saying their view had been obstructed. Another wrote that I might have lost my balance during a playful exchange. A bridesmaid emailed the detective to say Lorraine had called and reminded her that the family wanted to avoid harming vulnerable children, served by Bright Harbor. The most important call went to Mallory. By then, Mallory had already retained a criminal defense attorney. She knew the police had requested another interview, and she knew the hotel footage would show her positioning me on the blue tile before Corinne approached. According to the voicemail she later preserved, Corinne told her they needed to stay consistent. Corinne said the plan had only been to create a funny moment and that I ruined it by panicking. Then she told Mallory to delete their wedding week chat because reporters might twist harmless planning messages. Mallory did not delete it. Corinne sent another audio message 20 minutes later. If you suddenly change your story, I will tell them the pool idea was yours. That threat changed Mallory's calculation. She had participated. She had guided me to the marked tile and agreed to laugh. She was not an innocent guest who discovered the truth afterward. But Corinne's message made it clear that loyalty would not protect her. If the investigation tightened, Corinne intended to make Mallory absorb the blame. Mallory's attorney contacted the detective the next morning. She admitted Corinne had planned to push me into the deep end. Corinne told her I could float long enough for 2 strong swimmers standing nearby to pull me out. Mallory knew there would be a push, knew where it would happen, and agreed to position me. She claimed she did not know I could not swim. The detective did not promise immunity. The state's attorney considered a limited non-prosecution agreement, only because Mallory came forward before charges were filed, surrendered her original phone, consented to a forensic extraction, and agreed to provide truthful testimony. She could still face civil liability and professional consequences for her role. Mallory's cooperation did not make her good. It made her useful. The forensic technician recovered the full message thread with metadata, deleted fragments, voice notes, and timestamps. Mallory had not received a vague instruction to arrange photographs. She and Corinne had discussed the water, the depth, the placement of guests, and the reaction Corinne wanted from the room. Denise called me after the detective authorized her to see a limited preview. You need to prepare yourself, she said. This proves planning more clearly than the footage ever could. She read the exchange exactly as it appeared. Mallory had written, "You're really putting her in the deep side?" Corinne replied, 5 seconds. She can float. Laugh first. The message did not make me feel relieved. It made me angry in a cleaner, more dangerous way. For weeks, Corinne had described the push as an impulsive joke that became frightening only because I panicked. Now her own words showed that she had chosen the deep side before I arrived at the pool. 5 seconds. She can float. Laugh first. I had never told Corinne I could float. She knew the opposite. Denise would not let me photograph the preview or forward it to anyone. Mallory's phone was still being processed under an evidence protocol agreed upon by her attorney, the detective, and the technician. Until that work was complete, the message was not just something we had seen on a screen. It had to be tied to the device, account, date, and surrounding conversation in a way Corinne's lawyer could not dismiss as an edited screenshot. The process took another 9 days. The technician created a complete forensic image of Mallory's phone, calculated digital identifiers showing that the copy remained unchanged, and documented every person who handled the device. The original phone was sealed after extraction. Investigators worked from the verified copy. Denise explained the procedure without pretending I needed to become a computer expert. "They are preserving the conversation as it existed," she said. "Not only the visible words, they are preserving timestamps, account information, deleted fragments, attachments, and the order in which the messages were sent. Can Corinne claim Mallory altered them? She can claim anything. The metadata will determine whether the claim has support." The complete thread began 3 days before the wedding. Corinne sent Mallory a photograph of the hotel pool deck with a blue circle drawn around one mosaic tile. "Put Leah here for the sister photos." Mallory answered, "That's the deep side." Corinne replied, "I know." Later, Mallory asked, "You're really pushing her in?" Corinne wrote, "5 seconds. She can float. 2 swimmers will be close." Mallory asked whether I knew about the prank. Corinne replied, "No. If she knows, the reaction won't be real." Another message followed. "Keep the children away from that side. Laugh first so everyone understands it's funny." Mallory sent a nervous face emoji and wrote, "If she gets mad, I'm blaming you." Corinne answered, "She always gets mad." Then Mom explains her. The thread continued on the wedding day. Mallory confirmed that 2 guests who had competed on a college swim team were standing near the bar. She told Corinne she would bring me to the blue tile after the cake photographs. Corinne instructed her to wait until Adrian was speaking with donors from Bright Harbor. The plan was not detailed enough to prove Corinne intended serious injury. She appeared to believe I would be pulled out within seconds. But it proved that the push was not spontaneous, the location was not accidental, and the laughter had been prepared as part of the event. Mallory had not simply failed to stop Corinne. She had helped arrange the conditions. Her attorney negotiated the terms of her continued cooperation with the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office. No one promised that she would escape every consequence. Prosecutors agreed only that they would consider her early cooperation, truthful testimony, and surrender of the phone when deciding whether to charge her. Denise warned me not to confuse cooperation with innocence. "I do not," I said. "She put me on that tile. She will likely face civil exposure even if the state does not prosecute her." "Good." Denise looked at me over the top of her glasses, waiting to see whether I would take the word back. I did not. Mallory knew there would be a push. She helped isolate the location and remove children from the area. She deserved a consequence. The fact that Corinne later threatened her did not erase the choice she had already made. On June 3rd, the detective invited Denise and me to view a limited portion of the hotel footage. We watched in a small interview room at the county police station. The detective controlled the video and paused whenever Denise asked a procedural question. There was no audio. The first camera showed Mallory approaching me near the ballroom doors. She touched my elbow and directed me toward the pool. I could see myself asking a question. Mallory pointed toward the blue tile and adjusted my position once, then again. The second camera covered the pool deck from above. Corinne entered the frame behind me. Even knowing what was coming, I stopped breathing. She looked toward the bar first. One of the former college swimmers stood less than 20 feet away. Then Corinne looked toward the atrium doors, where Adrian had been speaking to guests. She walked behind me, placed both hands between my shoulder blades, and drove forward. My body disappeared over the edge. The video continued. Corinne did not immediately lean toward the water. She turned toward the guests and lifted both hands as though presenting the end of a joke. Mallory laughed. 2 other people smiled uncertainly. Then the water began moving violently where I had gone under. Jocelyn entered the frame at a run. Only after she jumped did Corinne bend toward the pool and begin shouting. The detective paused the footage. I stared at the still image of my sister looking into the water while Jocelyn's body broke the surface beside me. "She checked where the swimmers were," I said. "That is one possible interpretation," he replied. "The footage establishes where she looked and what she did. A witness or additional evidence may establish why. He was careful, for the same reason the medical staff had been careful. Evidence grew stronger when no one asked it to prove more than it could. The footage showed the planned location, the push, the delay, and the rescue. It did not record Corinne's thoughts. It did not contain her instructions to Mallory. It could not prove by itself that she knew I could not float. The messages supplied those missing connections. After the detective resumed the video, I watched paramedics cover me with a blanket and security separate Corinne from the stretcher. In the background, Mallory stood near a service door looking at her phone. The forensic extraction showed what she received. Corinne had written, "She is fine. Stick to what we planned." Mallory answered, "The ambulance is here." Corinne replied, "Because Leah is making it worse. We splashed her as a joke. That's all." Mallory did not respond. 40 minutes later, after police arrived, Corinne sent another message. "Delete this chat. Reporters twist everything." Mallory wrote, "I'm not deleting anything." Corinne answered, "Then remember the pool idea came from you." Those messages mattered for a different reason than the planning thread. The earlier conversation established preparation. The later conversation showed Corinne attempting to control the account and remove evidence once she knew a police report existed. The detective called it possible evidence of consciousness of guilt. Denise reminded me that the phrase did not guarantee a charge. The prosecutor still needed corroborating witnesses, a clear sequence, and a charging theory supported by Maryland law. Mallory's account had to be tested against the video, hotel records, and statements she gave before deciding to cooperate. Corinne's attorney would argue that asking to delete messages reflected fear of embarrassment, not awareness of a crime. No one announced an arrest. No one told me the case was won. When Denise and I left the station, I sat in her car with my phone in my hand and imagined what would happen if I posted one still image from the footage beside Corinne's message. "She is fine. Stick to what we planned." For the first time, I possessed something simple enough to pierce every polished statement my family had issued. I could have sent it to the reporter. I could have posted it beneath Bright Harbor's explanation and watched Corinne lose control of the comments before dinner. "I want people to see it," I said. "I know. They are still calling it a family disagreement. They may not be able to after charges are filed. And if charges are never filed? Then we decide what can be released without damaging Marin, Celeste, or the civil case." The answer felt slow and unsatisfying. Jocelyn was waiting at my house when I returned. She listened while I described the footage, then took my phone from my hand and placed it face down on the table. "Not publishing it is not the same as protecting Corinne," she said. "It feels like silence." "No, silence was signing her version because your parents threatened you. This is choosing when evidence will have the greatest effect. They get more time to lie, and the detective gets more time to prove they are lying." I walked to the kitchen window. Summer had settled over the neighborhood, bright and humid. A child rode a bicycle through a sprinkler across the street, shrieking each time the water struck his legs. "I hate that they still control how this looks." "They control the public story for now," Jocelyn said. "They do not control the phone, the hotel server, or Mallory's testimony." She was right, but accepting help meant allowing other people to handle pieces I could not supervise. That was harder for me than gathering information alone. My instincts told me to request every document, attend every interview, and know every strategy before anyone moved. Denise refused to let me do that. Marin's interviews remained protected. Celeste communicated through her own attorney. Mallory's agreement belonged to the prosecutor. The hotel footage stayed in evidence. I received updates, not ownership. For the first time since the wedding, I stopped trying to hold the entire case in my hands. The investigation continued through June. Detectives re-interviewed the guests closest to the pool before any footage became public. Some corrected their first statements after being shown where they had been standing. Others admitted they laughed because Mallory laughed first and they assumed the bride had arranged something harmless. One guest remembered Corinne saying, "She'll be up in a second," before Jocelyn jumped. Another said Lorraine approached him after the ambulance left and asked him not to use the word push because it might create legal trouble over an accident. None of those accounts proved everything. Together, they showed that Corinne and Lorraine were already shaping language while I was being transported to the hospital. Mallory provided more. After her second police interview, Corinne sent 3 messages accusing her of betrayal. The first said Mallory had misunderstood the plan. The second said Mallory had selected the pool as the prank location. The third warned that Corinne would tell investigators Mallory acted alone if she changed her story again. Mallory also preserved a voicemail from Lorraine. Lorraine's voice was calm. "Mallory, everyone understands you were helping with a harmless wedding moment. Stay with the account you gave at the hotel. Leah's reaction does not change anyone's intent. Do not let investigators frighten you into describing something more serious than it was." The voicemail had arrived 2 hours after my meeting with Malcolm and Lorraine. I did not know what conversation occurred before Lorraine made that call. I knew only what the recording established. She contacted a witness and told her to maintain a particular account while police interviews were active. The state's attorney's office reviewed the call along with Corinne's threats. The prosecutor did not tell me whether Lorraine would be charged. Denise said the evidence could influence charging decisions, plea negotiations, or the assessment of whether either woman attempted to interfere with witnesses. Mallory's life began changing before any criminal decision. She worked as an event coordinator for a company that managed weddings and corporate receptions. After her attorney disclosed that she had intentionally positioned a guest for an undisclosed pool stunt, the company placed her on leave. 2 weeks later, it terminated her employment for violating safety rules and exposing clients to risk. She also received notice that I intended to include her in the civil claim. Mallory's attorney asked whether I would release her from liability in exchange for continued testimony. I declined. She can cooperate because it is the right thing to do or because it helps her legal position, I told Denise. Neither reason requires me to absorb her consequences. Denise conveyed that response without adding emotion. Mallory continued cooperating. By late July, the criminal file contained the planning messages, post-incident deletion request, hotel footage, medical records, witness statements, Adrian's account of the hallway conversation, and the independently preserved messages involving Marin. The evidence had become stronger than anything I imagined on the night of the wedding. Then Lorraine's attorney contacted the prosecutor. Denise called me on July 28th and asked me to come to her office. She would not discuss the message by phone. When I arrived, she handed me a 2-page letter labeled "Proffer for Potential Cooperation." Lorraine was offering to provide documents and correct portions of her earlier police statement. Through her lawyer, she claimed Corinne had repeatedly misrepresented events to her and had placed Lorraine at risk by using family and nonprofit records without full context. "She is saying Corinne deceived her?" I asked. "She is saying she has information relevant to the investigation and wants the prosecutor to consider her cooperation before making charging decisions." My mother did not suddenly discover the truth. That is not what the letter says. The proposed materials included Bright Harbor board files, internal complaint records, emails concerning the memoir, drafts of family statements after the wedding, and an audio message retained in Lorraine's synchronized iMessage account. I remembered the chime near the pool and the way she had silenced her phone before walking into the hallway. Can she erase the audio now? Her attorney says the laptop and phone will be surrendered for forensic imaging if the prosecutor accepts the proffer process. No one is promising Lorraine immunity. Why now? Denise tapped the section referring to Corinne's threats against Mallory. This may have convinced Lorraine that Corinne will shift responsibility to anyone available. That was an inference, not a fact. I had not spoken to Lorraine, and I did not know what she feared behind closed doors. I knew only what she was offering. The woman who had saved every version of every family crisis now wanted to trade those versions for consideration. "She is not choosing me," I said. "No. She is choosing the exit that costs her least." That is how I read it. I finished the first page and turned to the second. The final paragraph listed older records Lorraine claimed remained in her possession. Insurance correspondence from Deep Creek Lake, Malcolm's handwritten revisions, copies of statements submitted to the marina and rental insurer. Then I reached the last line. Lorraine Holloway also possesses the original handwritten account Leah completed at the Marina Clinic on the day of the 2009 incident. For 16 years, my parents had used the statement with my broken signature to prove I changed my story. My mother had kept the first version all along. My mother had kept the first version because she never trusted a lie, unless she also kept the truth. That was the part I understood as soon as Denise explained the proposed cooperation process. Lorraine had not preserved my handwritten Marina statement out of remorse. She kept it for the same reason she kept every draft, complaint, email, and corrected account. Information gave her leverage over whoever needed a particular version most. Now she needed leverage over Corinne. The state's attorney agreed to hear Lorraine's proffer in early August. The agreement did not grant immunity, dismiss possible charges, or promise a particular sentence. It said only that prosecutors would consider the completeness and truthfulness of her cooperation when deciding how to proceed. I had no role in approving it. Denise repeated that sentence twice because she knew I would struggle with it. "My mother helped create this," I said. "Why does she get to negotiate?" "Because prosecutors want evidence," Denise answered. "They are not asking whether Lorraine deserves your forgiveness. They are asking whether she can authenticate records, correct false statements, and help prove what happened. And if she lies again, the agreement can become worthless, and anything independently obtained may still be used." Lorraine's attorney surrendered 3 gray archive boxes, 1 external hard drive, an iPhone, and a MacBook. The detective photographed each item before opening it. A forensic technician created an inventory, scanned the paper records, and made protected images of the electronic devices. No one carried the boxes into a room and announced that the family secret had been found. The process was slower than that. Every page received an identifier. Every digital file had to be tied to an account, device, timestamp, and location. Duplicate drafts were separated from final versions. Personal medical information unrelated to the case was restricted. For more than 2 weeks, I received only procedural updates. Then Denise called me to her office. She had placed 3 documents on the conference table, each inside a clear evidence sleeve. The first was the handwritten statement I completed at the Marina Clinic in July of 2009. My writing tilted harder to the right than it did now. Near the bottom, a drop of water had blurred part of the word behind. The final sentence remained readable. Corinne pushed me from behind. I touched the edge of the plastic sleeve but did not lift it. For 16 years, I had wondered whether I remembered writing those words because I needed to believe there had once been a version of myself who refused to cooperate. There she was, 23 years old. Wet, coughing, frightened, and still accurate. The second document was a photocopy of that form with Malcolm's handwritten revisions in the margins. He had circled the word pushed and written lost balance above it. Beside Corinne's name, he wrote remove blame. At the bottom, he added a note reminding Lorraine that a criminal accusation could affect Corinne's scholarship record and college applications. The third was the supplemental statement bearing my signature. The 3 pages showed the progression clearly: my original account, my father's proposed changes, the version submitted to the rental property insurer after my parents threatened to withdraw financial support. There was also a cover email Lorraine sent Malcolm the night I signed. Keep Leah's first form in the family file. Send only the corrected statement to insurance. If this ever comes up again, the signed version must be the one everyone remembers. I read the sentence until the letters stopped looking like language. They knew, I said. Denise did not soften the answer. The records support that they knew your original account was different. The county incident report from 2009 explained why no deeper investigation followed. The responding deputy recorded that a woman had fallen from a dock during a family argument. He noted that accounts conflicted, but that the family later provided a signed statement describing an accidental fall. I had declined hospital transport and had not returned to file a formal criminal complaint. My parents had not erased the incident. They had closed the door I had been too dependent and frightened to reopen. The archive contained more than Deep Creek Lake. But the prosecutor did not treat every ugly family record as evidence of the wedding assault. Denise explained the categories carefully. The core criminal case against Corinne still depended on the hotel footage, Mallory's verified planning messages, witness accounts, medical records, and Corinne's attempts to delete the chat. Those records established what she planned and what she did on the pool deck. The Marin files showed a separate alleged incident and possible motive to silence or discredit a witness. Their use would depend on evidentiary rules and judicial decisions. Celeste's complaint belonged primarily to Bright Harbor's safeguarding review and any civil proceedings. It demonstrated an institutional pattern, but it did not automatically prove a crime at my sister's wedding. Lorraine's emails to Adrian were relevant because they showed she knowingly gave him false information about the lake incident after Marin accused Corinne. One email read, "Leah blamed Corinne after an accident when they were younger. Her fear made her certain of things that did not occur. Lorraine wrote that, despite having my original statement in her archive, she had not forgotten what I said. She had chosen which document Adrian was allowed to know existed. The archive also contained a folder labeled Crisis Scripts. Inside were draft messages for board members, donors, wedding guests, Adrian, and Marin. The wording changed depending on the recipient, but each draft followed the same sequence. Acknowledge fear without acknowledging harm. Describe the accused person's intention as supportive or playful. Describe the victim's reaction as disproportionate. Warn that continuing the accusation will hurt innocent people. Offer privacy as though silence were a gift. My mother had turned family denial into a reusable template. One document contained notes from her call with Marin. Lorraine had written phrases beside the girl's name before making contact. Fear is not proof. Protect father's happiness. Do not reward escalation. Underneath those phrases, Lorraine recorded Marin's response. She said, "I know what happened to me." Lorraine had underlined the sentence twice. I asked Denise why. We cannot know from the underline alone. I knew what I believed. My mother marked resistance the way other people marked an error that needed correcting. The most damaging electronic evidence came from the MacBook. The forensic examiner found an iMessage audio note synchronized from Lorraine's phone. She had sent it to Corinne 23 minutes after hotel security called police, and before either woman completed a formal interview. Lorraine had pressed keep, preventing the message from expiring automatically. The synced file remained in her account and on the laptop. Metadata confirmed the sender, recipient, time, and device history. The prosecutor allowed Denise and me to hear it once, under controlled conditions. My mother's voice filled the small conference room. I told you to make Leah look unstable before she could poison the book and the board against you. I did not tell you to put her in the deep end. Stop talking to Adrian, stop messaging Mallory, and do not answer police questions until we agree on what happened. The story is that Leah overreacted to a wedding joke. Do you understand me? The message ended with a faint sound of a door closing. I sat very still. Lorraine had not ordered the push itself. The recording was clear about that. She had helped create the objective. Make Leah look unstable. Corinne selected the method. Afterward, Lorraine's first instinct was not to ask whether I could breathe. It was to coordinate the account. The audio note hurt Lorraine as much as it helped her cooperation. It placed her inside the effort to discredit me before the wedding, and inside the attempt to shape statements afterward. Her attorney could not present her as a shocked mother who later discovered her daughter's cruelty. Lorraine was not exposing a system she had misunderstood. She was exposing a system she helped design. In September, her attorney requested a meeting with me and Denise. The prosecutor did not require me to attend. Denise advised me to decline unless I believed hearing Lorraine directly would help me make decisions about the civil case or any future request for a victim impact statement. I agreed because I wanted to remove one final uncertainty. The meeting took place in a private conference room at Denise's office. Lorraine arrived with her own attorney. She wore a navy suit and carried no purse, phone, or papers. For the first time in my life, she entered a room without controlling the documents inside it. She looked older than she had at the wedding. That observation did not create sympathy. Time had passed for all of us. Her attorney began by stating that Lorraine had voluntarily provided records, corrected portions of her first police interview, and accepted responsibility for minimizing prior complaints. Lorraine interrupted him. "I chose you this time," she told me. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in the sentence. "You chose yourself." Her face tightened. "I could have kept those records private. You kept them private for 16 years. And then I released them. After Corinne threatened Mallory and your lawyer explained that you could be charged." Lorraine looked toward Denise. "Does she have to speak to me this way?" Denise answered calmly. "Leah may respond to a claim made directly to her." Lorraine folded her hands on the table. "I am trying to repair what I can. You are trying to survive what you helped create. I protected your sister too long. You protected the version of the family that gave you the most control." Her attorney shifted in his chair, but Lorraine raised one hand. "I know you are angry. You do not get to reduce this to anger. You kept my first statement. You showed Adrian the second one. You told Marin that telling the truth would ruin her father's happiness. You called witnesses while I was in the hospital. I believed I could contain the damage. That belief was the damage. For a moment, her expression lost its practiced calm. Your father has moved into the guest room. He says I destroyed the family by turning over the archive. Dad helped create the archive. He may leave. I waited. Lorraine looked at me as though I had missed my cue. I do not know what I will do if he leaves. There it was. The request hidden beneath the confession. Not forgiveness yet. Not openly. She wanted reassurance that if Malcolm abandoned her and Corinne went to prison, I would become the daughter who absorbed the remaining consequences. I will not take care of you because the people you protected turn against you, I said. I am your mother. You used that title to demand access to me after the hospital. It did not work then either. Her attorney said Lorraine was not asking for a commitment. Lorraine looked at him sharply. She had been asking. She simply wanted me to volunteer before the request became visible. I need to know whether you will acknowledge my cooperation when the prosecutor decides what to do, she said. I will tell the truth. You surrendered important evidence after your own legal risk became clear. I will not call it courage, and I will not write a letter asking anyone to forgive you. You would let them charge me after I gave you the statement that clears your name? The statement does not clear my name. It confirms that you knew the truth while helping Corinne use the lie. Lorraine's mouth pressed into a narrow line. I expected anger. Instead, she sounded tired. Your sister will say this was all my idea. Will she be lying? Lorraine looked away. The answer was not simple. That was why Corinne had survived so long. My mother designed the rules, my father enforced them, and Corinne learned to use them more aggressively than either parent expected. They were responsible in different ways. None of them became innocent because another person was worse. The state's attorney filed charges against Corinne on September 22nd. She was charged in Maryland with second-degree assault based on the planned push at the hotel pool. Additional allegations involving deleted evidence, witness pressure, and the earlier incidents remained under review or available for use in separate proceedings. The charging document did not call the wedding push attempted murder. It alleged intentional offensive physical contact and harm supported by the footage, messages, witnesses, and medical evidence. Corinne appeared through counsel at her first court hearing. She was released pending trial under conditions that prohibited direct or indirect contact with me and Marin. She could communicate with Adrian only through attorneys regarding the divorce, and could not ask third parties to carry messages to either victim. I attended remotely from Denise's office rather than sitting in the courthouse. The camera showed Corinne beside her attorney, dressed in gray, her face composed for the judge. No one handcuffed her in a dramatic hallway. No one gave me a private speech about justice. The judge reviewed the conditions, warned Corinne that violations could affect her release, and set the next hearing date. I allowed myself to feel satisfied. Not healed. Not generous. Satisfied. Bright Harbor suspended Corinne and Lorraine from all board, fundraising, and program activities while the outside review continued. The interim executive director remained in place. Youth services stayed open, but neither woman could access staff complaints or contact participants on behalf of the organization. That evening, Jocelyn brought dinner to my house. We ate at the kitchen table beside the window while rain moved across the glass. You were right, she said. The process took longer. I was not sure I could wait, but you did. I looked at the copied charging document Denise had allowed me to keep. My name appeared only where necessary. The evidence did not describe me as jealous, hysterical, unforgiving, or difficult. It described inaction. Corinne approached from behind. She placed both hands on me. She pushed me into the deep end. For the first time, an official document began with what she did instead of how I reacted. The relief lasted until the following morning. Denise forwarded a motion filed by Corinne's defense attorney. The motion challenged the reliability of my account and asked the court to limit references to the Deep Creek Lake incident. Attached was the supplemental statement I signed in 2009. The defense argued that I had described the lake event as an accident for 16 years, then changed my story only after Corinne's wedding, marriage, nonprofit position, and book contract began collapsing. It described my new account as a campaign of revenge supported by former employees, an alienated stepdaughter, and a husband seeking leverage in divorce. The original handwritten statement was mentioned only as an unverified family document discovered after Lorraine sought favorable treatment. Corinne's lawyer was not denying that she pushed me at the wedding. He was preparing to argue that everything else happened because I had spent 16 years waiting to punish her. Corinne's lawyer wanted the court to treat my old signature as a door that locked every other fact outside. The prosecution answered that the case did not depend on what happened at Deep Creek Lake. It depended on hotel footage, verified messages, medical records, witness statements, and Corinne's conduct after the wedding. My first handwritten account and Malcolm's revisions explained why the old statement existed, but even without them, a camera had recorded Corinne placing both hands on my back and pushing me into the deep end. The judge postponed any final decision about how much of the older incident could be mentioned. That question would depend on what issues the defense raised if the case went to trial. Denise explained that this was not a defeat. The defense wants a simple argument, she said. You changed your story, so nothing you say can be trusted. Our answer is also simple. You disclosed the signature before they used it, and the current assault has independent evidence. I still signed it. Yes. She did not rush to tell me the signature meant nothing. It meant I had surrendered under pressure. It meant my family had used financial control successfully. It meant I had spent 16 years avoiding a confrontation I feared I could not survive. It did not mean Corinne had not pushed me. By October, the immediate crisis had become a series of scheduled consequences. Adrian filed for divorce in Maryland, citing irreconcilable differences. He and Corinne had signed a prenuptial agreement before the wedding, and they had no children together. Marin was Adrian's daughter, not a child of the marriage, so there was no custody dispute between Adrian and Corinne. The prenup kept most premarital assets separate. Corinne remained in the condominium she had owned before the wedding, while Adrian returned to the house he had shared with Marin before the engagement. Their lawyers still had to address wedding expenses, a joint account opened shortly before the ceremony, and a small amount of property purchased for their planned home. The divorce did not end in a week. Corinne contested the date of separation and argued that Adrian had abandoned the marriage during a temporary family crisis. Adrian's attorney answered with the police report, the no-contact conditions, and Corinne's messages about Marin. Hearings were scheduled, documents exchanged, and fees accumulated. Adrian kept me informed only when an issue touched my case. He did not ask me to testify in the divorce, and I did not become his advisor. Marin continued therapy. She agreed to attend several sessions with him, but she did not move back into his house immediately. She divided her time according to the arrangement between Adrian and her mother, and chose when she wanted private contact with him. One afternoon, Adrian told me Marin had allowed him to drive her to school again. He sounded relieved. That does not mean everything is repaired, I said. I know. She reminded me before she got out of the car. That was the kind of progress they had. Small, conditional, and controlled by the person who had been ignored. My own life became quieter. I returned to my regular schedule at the district office. The reporter who had questioned my credibility requested another interview after the original Marina statement became part of the court record. I declined through Denise. I was not interested in becoming publicly famous for surviving my sister. At work, I supervised crisis plans, met with school teams, and spent more time than usual checking whether frightened students had been allowed to describe events before adults interpreted them. I never used my case as a lesson in meetings. I did not need to mention Corinne to recognize how quickly institutions could transform a person's reaction into the problem. Jocelyn still came to my house twice a week, although she stopped pretending every visit was necessary. Sometimes she brought case notes, sometimes she brought dinner and refused to discuss evidence until we had eaten. In November, Bright Harbor's outside review was completed. The report ran more than 100 pages. I did not receive confidential information about teenagers or employees who had not consented to disclosure. Denise received the findings related to Corinne, Lorraine, Celeste, and the statements used in fundraising materials. The investigator found that Corinne had repeatedly asked employees and program participants to disclose personal fears in settings where she controlled their evaluations or access to opportunities. In several documented cases, she later used those disclosures during exercises the individuals had not agreed to. The report did not claim every exercise was abusive. It distinguished between voluntary, professionally supervised activities and incidents where Corinne created fear without meaningful consent. Celeste's storage room complaint was substantiated. The colleague who found her confirmed that the door had been held from the outside. Building access logs placed Corinne in the hallway. An internal draft from Lorraine instructed the board to avoid interviewing additional employees until donor concerns could be managed. The report concluded that Lorraine had interfered with complaint procedures, minimized credible safety concerns, and treated protection of Corinne's reputation as an organizational priority. It also found that Bright Harbor's origin materials contained material inaccuracies about the Deep Creek Lake incident. Corinne was not the person who entered the water or pulled me to safety. Tyler Boone had done that. The board met across 3 sessions. Corinne submitted a written defense accusing the investigators of applying current standards to misunderstood leadership practices. She argued that her methods were intense because the teenagers Bright Harbor served needed adults willing to challenge fear. She also claimed the report was contaminated by a revenge campaign involving me, Celeste, Adrian, and Marin. The board removed her for cause. The vote did not close Bright Harbor. It removed Corinne from leadership, fundraising, youth contact, and access to internal complaint files. Lorraine lost her board position for interfering with the investigation and failing to disclose conflicts. The interim executive director remained in charge. The organization announced a new safeguarding policy, an outside complaint channel, and a full separation between board members and employee investigations. 3 months later, Bright Harbor changed its name. I was asked whether I would consider joining an advisory committee. I declined. The interim director seemed surprised. "You helped expose the weaknesses in the old structure. That does not make me the right person to run the new one." I did not want Corinne's position. I did not want a title created from my injury. The best proof that the organization had changed was that it could continue without replacing one Holloway sister with another. Celeste received a written correction to her personnel file. Bright Harbor confirmed that her complaint had been credible and that her departure should not have been described as evidence of professional instability. She later told me the correction mattered more than an apology. "An apology can disappear after the meeting," she said. "The record stays." The publisher completed its review in December. Corinne's memoir contract allowed cancellation for material factual inaccuracies, failure to cooperate with fact-checking, and conduct likely to undermine the book's stated purpose. The publisher terminated the agreement and demanded repayment of the unearned portion of her advance. The original advance had been $120,000. Taxes, agent fees, and previous spending meant Corinne no longer had the full amount available. Her speaking contracts did not vanish in a single morning. Some organizations waited for the criminal case. Others canceled after the Bright Harbor report. A university withdrew a scheduled lecture on trauma-informed leadership. A regional nonprofit removed her from a spring conference. 2 organizations demanded the return of deposits paid for appearances she could no longer make. Corinne's legal fees continued growing. Her condominium was premarital property, so Adrian had no claim to it under the prenup. By January, however, she listed it for sale to cover defense costs, the publisher's repayment demand, and expected civil obligations. I learned that through a financial disclosure connected to the civil case, not through gossip or a dramatic photograph of a moving truck. I did not celebrate the loss of her home. I also did not pretend it was unfair. Corinne had earned substantial income from Bright Harbor and paid speaking work. She had used part of that income to support a lifestyle built around public credibility. Once the credibility disappeared and legal costs arrived, the numbers no longer worked. My own legal bills had passed $20,000. Some costs were being handled under the contingency portion of Denise's agreement, while others came from the retainer and additional hourly work involving records and media issues. I had used savings, postponed replacing my car, and reduced travel plans for the year. Revenge did not make me rich. It cost money, leave time, sleep, and privacy. The difference was that I had chosen those costs after understanding them. My parents could no longer attach hidden conditions to the support I needed. In January, the victim witness coordinator asked whether I wanted to prepare a statement in case the criminal case ended in a plea or sentencing hearing. She explained that the defense would continue using my signed supplemental statement to challenge my credibility and reduce Corinne's responsibility. The prosecution did not need me to claim I had always been brave or consistent. They needed me to tell the truth. I wrote my first draft in one sitting. I wrote that I had signed a lie because my parents threatened my housing, tuition, and reputation. I wrote that I had remained silent because I feared losing the family completely. I wrote that my silence allowed Corinne to build a story from what happened. Then I added 3 paragraphs blaming myself for every later person she hurt. Jocelyn read the draft at my dining table. She crossed out the first paragraph, then the second, then the third. "You did not put Marin under the water," she said. "I let Corinne learn there would be no consequence. You were not responsible for raising her. I knew what she could do. You knew what she did to you. You did not know every future choice she would make." I stayed quiet. Yes, say that. Do not turn silence into permission for someone else's violence. I wanted to argue, but the sentences she crossed out sounded like Lorraine's logic turned inward. If I accepted responsibility for Corinne's later conduct, I was still treating the victim's reaction as more important than the person who created the danger. I revised the statement. I admitted that I signed the supplemental account. I admitted that I did not correct Corinne publicly when she began using the lake story. I admitted that part of me wanted official recognition, financial compensation, and a consequence severe enough that she could not laugh it away. I did not apologize for those wants. My final draft included one sentence I kept returning to. I take responsibility for the years I did not speak. I do not take responsibility for what Corinne chose to do during those years. In early February, the victim witness coordinator called with an official update. She could not discuss private negotiations between the prosecutor and Corinne's defense attorney. She could tell me that Corinne had agreed in principle to plead guilty to second-degree assault. The written factual basis stated that Corinne planned to push me into the deep end, knew I could not swim, instructed Mallory to place me on the marked tile, arranged for capable swimmers to stand nearby, and told Mallory to laugh so guests would interpret the assault as a joke. It also stated that after I was taken for medical treatment, Corinne pressured Mallory to maintain a false account and asked her to delete their messages. The prosecution would recommend 18 months of active incarceration, followed by supervised probation, continued no-contact conditions, restitution as determined by the court, and restrictions related to unsupervised work with minors during probation. The judge was not bound to accept every recommendation. The allegations involving Marin and Celeste were not converted into additional charges simply to make the agreement appear larger. Their records would remain relevant to Bright Harbor's findings, civil matters, risk assessment, and any sentencing memorandum the court permitted. I asked why Corinne had agreed. The coordinator answered carefully. "I cannot characterize her private reasoning. I can tell you that the agreement resolves the charged case without a trial and limits her sentencing exposure." That was all I was entitled to know. I had imagined the criminal case ending with Corinne forced to hear every witness while a courtroom watched her lose control. A plea meant there would be no trial, no public cross-examination, and no final dramatic reveal. It also meant she would place her name beneath a factual statement saying the push was planned. For most of my life, Corinne had survived by forcing other people to sign her version. Now she would have to sign one she could not rewrite. 2 days later, Lorraine arrived at Denise's office with a draft character letter. Her own case remained unresolved. Prosecutors were considering allegations related to her false statements and pressure on witnesses. Her cooperation had been substantial, but it had begun only after her legal exposure became clear. The letter said she had preserved the archive because she loved both daughters and had finally chosen truth over reputation. It described her as a frightened mother correcting years of mistakes. At the bottom was a space for my signature. "I am not asking you to forgive me," Lorraine said. "I am asking you to acknowledge that I helped stop Corinne. You helped after she stopped being safe for you. I gave them everything. You gave them what you had kept from everyone else." Her attorney said a letter from me could help the prosecutor understand the value of Lorraine's cooperation. "I will confirm the records were useful," I said. "I will not confirm this motive." Lorraine pushed the paper closer. "Just this once, Leah. Sign something that keeps your mother from losing everything." The words carried me back to the rental house in 2009. My father across the table. My original statement beside Lorraine's purse. A clean page, waiting to replace what I knew had happened. Denise placed a pen near my hand but did not tell me what to do. I picked it up. Lorraine watched the tip move toward the line where my name was supposed to go. Then I set the pen down without signing. I slid Lorraine's character letter back across the table without signing it. She stared at the empty line beneath the final paragraph as though my name had already belonged there. You said you would tell the truth, she said. I will. Then tell them my cooperation mattered. It did matter. Her shoulders loosened slightly. I will also tell them you kept evidence hidden for 16 years, pressured witnesses, and surrendered the archive only after your own lawyer explained your exposure. Her face hardened again. That is not the whole story. It is the part I personally know. Lorraine looked at Denise. She is punishing me. Denise did not answer for me. I am refusing to write another statement that protects a parent from the consequences of what happened to me, I said. You can explain your choices in your own words. Lorraine left the unsigned letter on the table. Her case concluded before Corinne's sentencing. Prosecutors credited her cooperation but did not erase her conduct. Lorraine entered a plea related to providing false information and attempting to influence witness accounts. She received supervised probation, community service, financial penalties, and a permanent loss of her position at Bright Harbor. She did not go to prison. I did not campaign for a harsher sentence, and I did not ask for mercy. Malcolm blamed her for surrendering the archive. By January, he had moved out of their house and into a furnished apartment near his brother. According to Lorraine's financial disclosures, they began formal separation discussions shortly afterward. Neither of them called me. Corinne's sentencing took place on March 18th, 3 days after the anniversary of the wedding. Jocelyn drove me to the Anne Arundel County Courthouse. I wore a navy dress, low heels, and the simple earrings I used for school board presentations. I did not want armor. I wanted clothing that felt like mine. Adrian arrived separately with his attorney. Marin came with her mother and advocate. At 16, she looked older than she had at the wedding, but not magically healed. She sat near Adrian without touching him. Their relationship had improved enough for them to occupy the same row. It had not improved enough for anyone to pretend the damage was gone. Lorraine sat alone behind Corinne's attorney. Malcolm did not attend. His lawyer submitted a letter arguing that the family had been destroyed by public pressure and Leah's refusal to resolve the matter privately. The prosecutor did not make it a focus. Corinne entered without looking toward me. She had sold her condominium the previous month and was living in a short-term rental while the publisher, her lawyers, and the civil claims competed for what remained of the proceeds. She wore a gray suit and no jewelry except a small gold cross. For years, she had understood how to dress like the person a room wanted to forgive. That morning, the room waited for evidence instead. The prosecutor summarized the case without theatrical language. On March 15, 2025, I reported the push before leaving the hotel. The emergency department documented water aspiration, coughing, chest pain, and my account of the assault. Hotel footage showed Mallory placing me on the blue tile and Corinne approaching from behind. The verified message thread showed that Corinne selected the deep end in advance. She knew I could not swim. She arranged for capable swimmers to remain nearby because she expected me to need rescue. She instructed Mallory to laugh first, so the guests would understand the push as entertainment. After the ambulance arrived, she told Mallory to remain consistent and later asked her to delete the conversation. The prosecutor referred to Lorraine's archive only after describing the core evidence. The archive showed why Corinne believed my fear could be used against me and why she expected the family to rewrite the event afterward. It explained the history. It did not replace the camera, messages, witnesses, police report, or medical records. The judge asked Corinne whether she accepted the factual basis of her guilty plea. She stood. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was quiet and controlled. Then her attorney presented mitigation. Corinne had no prior criminal convictions. Bright Harbor had provided years of legitimate services. She had believed I would be rescued within seconds and had never intended serious injury. She had lost her marriage, career, home, publishing contract, and public reputation. The attorney described Lorraine as a controlling mother who taught both daughters to protect the family image. When Corinne spoke, she used the same language. My mother taught me that appearances protected everyone, she said. That does not excuse what happened, but it explains why I panicked afterward. I made a terrible mistake during what I believed would be a harmless wedding prank. She still called it a prank. She still called it a mistake. She admitted planning the location, the swimmers, and the laughter, but tried to place the harm inside the moment when her plan failed. The judge did not argue with her about morality. He referred to preparation, a known vulnerability, and her behavior after the offense. This was not an unplanned movement during celebration, he said. You selected a person who could not swim, arranged the location and audience response, and relied on third parties to prevent the foreseeable consequences of your own act. Then it was my turn. I carried the statement Jocelyn had helped me revise. I did not look at Corinne until I reached the lectern. My sister is correct about one thing, I said. She did not intend for me to die. She intended for me to believe I might die for several seconds while a room laughed at my fear. Corinne's eyes moved toward me. I signed a false statement in 2009. My parents threatened my housing, tuition, and reputation, and I gave them the version they wanted. I remained silent for years afterward. I take responsibility for that silence. I placed both hands on the lectern, but my signature did not give Corinne permission to repeat the act. It did not make the lake an accident. It did not make the wedding a prank. It did not make Marin's fear attention-seeking or Celeste's panic instability. The courtroom remained quiet. I want Corinne to face consequences. I'm not ashamed to say that. I am relieved that an official record finally begins with what she did instead of how I reacted. I did not ask for the maximum sentence. I did not ask for leniency. I am not asking the court to heal my family. That family used healing as another word for silence. I am asking the court to impose the sentence it finds appropriate based on the act she planned, the danger she knew, and the evidence she tried to remove afterward. When I returned to my seat, Jocelyn placed her hand over mine. Corinne turned once, searching my face for anger, pity, or triumph. I let her see none of them. The judge accepted the plea agreement and sentenced her to 18 months of incarceration, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The no-contact order covering Marin and me remained in effect. During probation, Corinne could not work directly or unsupervised with minors. She was ordered to pay restitution for eligible medical expenses and documented losses. Although the judge made clear that collection would depend on her available resources, restitution was not a bag of money handed to me outside the courtroom. It became another enforceable obligation among several. Corinne was taken into custody after the hearing. There was no final speech between us. She looked toward Lorraine before deputies led her through the side door. Lorraine's chair was empty. She had left after the sentence was announced. Adrian's divorce had become final 6 weeks earlier. The prenup kept their premarital property separate, and the brief marriage had produced few joint assets. Adrian retained his house and retirement accounts. Corinne retained responsibility for debts and contracts connected to her career. There had been no custody battle because Marin was not Corinne's child. Adrian did not celebrate the divorce. He told me later that ending the marriage was simpler than rebuilding trust with his daughter. Marin attended therapy alone and sometimes with him. She still stayed primarily with her mother. Adrian drove her to school, attended appointments when invited, and stopped asking whether she had forgiven him. That was the work she required from him. Bright Harbor continued under a new name and an independent board. The staff created an outside reporting channel, prohibited unsupervised fear-based exercises, and removed the founder's story from its materials. I never joined the board. Celeste accepted a civil settlement and a formal correction to her employment record. Mallory also settled her part of my claim after losing her job in event planning. Her cooperation reduced her criminal exposure but did not erase her civil responsibility. The sale of Corinne's condominium closed in April. After the mortgage, taxes, legal fees, and publisher repayment were addressed, part of the remaining proceeds funded the civil settlement. My settlement closed in June. It was not a jackpot. After legal costs, medical expenses, lost income, and taxes on any applicable portions, the amount gave me stability rather than wealth. I paid the remaining legal bills. I replaced what I had withdrawn from savings. I continued therapy and created an emergency fund large enough that no parent, partner, or relative could ever threaten my housing to purchase my silence again. I kept my job. By July, I was 40 years old and still directed student support services for the school district. Most mornings began with ordinary problems: transportation plans, counseling referrals, staff training, and students whose fear deserved to be heard before adults decided what it meant. Jocelyn no longer had to appear at my door before I admitted I needed help. One Thursday evening, I called her first. "I have the water class tomorrow," I said. "I remember. Can you come?" "Yes." She did not praise me for asking. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. The class met at a community recreation center in Crofton. It was designed for adults with water-related trauma, not for competitive swimmers or children learning strokes. The instructor explained every movement before anyone entered the pool. No one was touched without permission. Maren came with her mother. She had enrolled in a separate session for teenagers and chose to sit in the viewing area before it began. Adrian was not there. Maren had not invited him. I wore a simple black swimsuit beneath a robe and stood beside the shallow steps while Jocelyn waited on a bench. The smell of chlorine still tightened something inside my chest. My hands became cold. For a moment, the indoor pool became the hotel atrium, then the lake, then every room where someone had told me my reaction mattered more than what caused it. The instructor remained several feet away. "You decide how far," she said. No one counted down. No one touched my back. No one laughed. I placed one foot on the first submerged step. The water covered my toes, then my ankle. My body wanted to retreat before anything had happened. I held the railing and let the fear exist without treating it as an order. Maren watched from behind the glass. I did not enter deeper to prove strength to her, Jocelyn, or myself. I stayed on the first step because that was the distance I had chosen. The first time Corinne pushed me into deep water, my family handed me a statement and told me where to sign. The last time, Lorraine handed me another blank line. I left it empty. 4 months later, I stepped into the water because I chose to. What happened to Leah shows why you should never let a family member redefine harm as a joke. When someone knowingly uses your fear, injury, money, housing, or reputation to control you, protecting the family image will not make the behavior stop. It usually teaches the abuser that there will be no consequence. You do not have to scream, seek revenge blindly, or expose everything online. Start with practical steps. Get medical care, write down what happened, save messages, request camera footage, speak through a lawyer when necessary, and let independent witnesses tell their own stories. You should also be honest about your own mistakes. Leah admitted that she once signed a false statement and stayed silent, but she refused to accept responsibility for Corinne's later choices. That distinction matters. Accountability means owning what you did, not carrying the guilt for another person's cruelty. You are also allowed to accept compensation, help, and support without feeling selfish. Forgiveness is not a legal duty, and reconciliation is not proof of healing. Sometimes the wisest ending is a firm boundary and an accurate record. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about women who stop protecting harmful families and finally protect themselves.